Welcome to another artist conversation in our series, Pathways for Dialogue, Past, Present, Future.
I'm going to start out by introducing my colleague here, Lavett Ballard. Lavette Ballard is an artist, an art historian like me, a curator, and an author. She holds a BA in studio art and art history with a minor in museum studies from Rutgers University. She also has an MFA in studio art from University of the Arts in Philadelphia. Her magazine has been commissioned twice for the cover of Time magazine. Her art has been commissioned twice, in March 2020 for a special 100th anniversary of Women's Suffrage edition, and in February 2023 for a special feature inspired by Isabel Wilkerson's book, Caste Origins of Our Discontent. So I'm going to talk more about that. That's why I wanted to give a little bit more of an introduction there. Among her accolades, she's a 2021 Yaddo Artist Residency Fellow and named by Black Art in America as one of the top 10 female emerging artists to collect. Her work has been exhibited in galleries and museums nationwide and is held in numerous public and private collections, including the Petrucci Family Foundation collection. She's represented by Long Sharp Art Gallery in Indianapolis and Gallery Myrtis in Baltimore. Welcome, Lavette.
Hi.
So today we're here to talk about a couple of things, to have a conversation about a book that we were recently involved in, and about her wonderful art that's featured in this book. And I want to start out by just saying a few words about the book. It's a book that features over 70 artists, original source material, essays, artworks, poetry, all produced from the start of the pandemic, March 2020 through July 2021. So it's very focused, 16 months, and we have wonderful contributions. And I want to just start out by reading just a little blurb from what Lavette contributed. She talks about the period being bittersweet. You use those words, bittersweet. And she says, no one could get copies of Time magazine due to nationwide shutdowns and quarantines. I was locked out of my studio, forced to work in my small bedroom at home, et cetera, et cetera. Like so many other artists in the book, you found strength to overcome obstacles, to reach deep within yourself and produce the wonderful art that you do. Could you tell us more about that time period and being shut out of your studio and the opportunities it gave you also to produce new work?
Yeah, right after I got commissioned for the cover, well, actually right before I got commissioned for the cover, I was starting to gain a little bit more notoriety and bigger collectors, and everything was going very well, very well. And then I was surprised by the cover, and I completed the cover, and I was really excited about it. My family and I were planning to go to a Black Academics Symposium in Atlanta when the week that the cover was going to hit. And I was like, okay, this is great. You know, everything's going good. A lot of shows coming up, and then freaking COVID. So I'm in Atlanta at my cousin's house, and the family's there, and they're all having a great time because he has a beautiful home, and we're having a good time connecting with some friends and so forth. And mind you, my cousin is a former Secret Service agent. And he literally came to us. The magazine hit newsstands, I believe, that Thursday for the following week. Or it started going out that Thursday. And he literally spoke to us when we got there that Tuesday and said, y'all might have to change your plans because this is not good. I'm hearing from my people in the government that the president may have to shut down the country. Like, president's not going to shut down the freaking country. Yeah. He's like, you forget who I used to work for. And I said, no, not now.
Not now.
We're going through the airport looking for the freaking magazine. We couldn't find it anywhere. And finally, literally like 2 days before we were about to leave, because that's when they finally said, we're going to shut down the government on Monday. And I'm like, well, what about my kids? We're flying home on Sunday. The kids go back to school on Monday. What are we going to do? And I couldn't find the magazine. I literally went to Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Target, you name it, every newsstand I could find. And they had the magazine there, and it said 100th anniversary of women's suffrage, but it was not my cover. And it was Oprah Winfrey, a painting of Oprah Winfrey on the cover. I didn't know at the time that because they had so many artists, they had it regional. So depending on where you lived in the country was where you were going to get my cover. So some of the covers were included with every magazine. So if you were in the Northeast, you would have got Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and then I think it was Viola Liuzzo and a bunch of other covers for women in that area. If you were in the South, you would get Oprah Winfrey. If you were in Atlanta, you got Oprah Winfrey and Toni Morrison and I forgot the woman's name, Mickalene Thomas did a piece. So you got those pieces, and my cover was an actual cover, but you had to live in Alabama. And they mailed it to you. So if you got a subscription, you got it. But if you went to the newsstands, it wasn't there. It was another cover. So by chance, my son said, well, Ma, did you even open the magazine? Because you sent them more pictures. At least look and see if they put the article. They asked you all those questions. So I opened it up, and literally on the second freaking page, after going to 5 different places, there was my cover. There all along, there clear as day, and I literally screamed in the Barnes & Noble. I bought every single magazine they had. I was like, I did this! And people were like, okay, you know, it's COVID. We don't know what's going on. You ain't messed up. Right. So it was great. I found my cover, and the best part was they did have an article on the inside about the process and how we created it and so forth. So that was really great. And they had pictures of me inside. But it was a great experience only because it was the first time I felt, people say as artists we're supposed to be validated, and you don't always get your flowers, you know. It felt like I was really, truly validated, especially when I saw the list of other artists they selected. And I did have quite a bit of imposter syndrome because they had Mickalene Thomas did a cover, Twaina Dutulo did a cover, Tim Okamura did a cover, my friend Bisa Butler did a cover. And I'm looking like, how did they get... Thank you. So,
well, congratulations.
Yeah, it was like really great. And then they shut it down. So people are on my social media. That's great, Lavette. We're so proud of you. I can't get the magazine. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And they couldn't even give me my advanced copies from Time because they got locked out their offices. So I didn't get my 100, not 100, I was supposed to get 10 copies. I didn't get those, never got them. But I did get a cover to my mom. And that's really what the bittersweet was. My mother passed, the cover hit newsstands May 13th, I believe, the same day they closed down the country. My mother passed April.
Okay, so you were able to give her a copy.
I was able
That's
to give
lovely.
her a copy. And her illness went very quick. Like, we found out she was terminal in the end of February, beginning of March. And by April, she was gone. So it went very quickly. She had colon cancer. And I really believe she knew and just didn't tell anyone. She was that type. Because she was living her best life for like a year. She was ziplining literally the July before. So, you know, but it was very bittersweet. And then all that death, it was just, it was a lot.
But you started a new series during that time.
Yes.
Quarantine Chronicles?
Yeah.
Dubbed.
Yeah, I call them the Quarantine Chronicles. I got locked out the studio. And my studio was the perfect studio. It was 1,200 square feet, literally 5 minutes away from my home. The hours weren't always conducive, but I worked with them. And I work very large. I work on very large 6 feet, 7 feet fences, sometimes 6 feet wide. I couldn't do that at home. So I went from 1,200 square feet to a small bedroom that is about the size of a large walk-in closet. And I didn't have any only when they told us they were closing our building because of the quarantine, they called us up and they said, listen, get whatever you need because we don't know when we'll be back and we can't get you back in. So I literally went there with my sons and said, listen, take this, take this, take this. I took as many of the prints as I could. I had 2 boxes of wood slices. And these wood slices I had bought for a friend's wedding. They were supposed to be having a wedding in June, and it was going to be an outdoor themed wedding. And they wanted the wood slices as chargers for their dinnerware. And so I had bought them for her and had them shipped to my studio. And so I just brought them thinking, oh, she's going to need them. And so I brought them home. And I brought my paints, I brought my brushes, I brought as many collage images as I could, my knives, you name it, my adhesives, everything I could bring. And I got into my little studio space at home, my bedroom, and I was like, okay, I worked on 2 prefabricated wood fence panels that I had, which were small. They were only about maybe 18 by 24. But then I was like, okay, now what I'm gonna do?
What next?
Well, I ain't got no more material. And she called me and told me that she was going to just do a Justice of the Peace wedding. She wasn't gonna do her wedding. And now I got all these wood slices. And I'm like, what am I gonna do with these? And so that's when I said, well, I just started working with birchwood. Let me try working with these. They are wood. I like wood. Mm-hmm. So I started working on those wood pieces, and they were like life. Mm-hmm. You know, they were like the sketches. It seemed like every time I turned around with the Say Her Name, with the Black Lives Matter, I wanted to tell that story, but I couldn't tell it big like I wanted. So I had to resort to doing it small, which was hard for me because I'm used to working so big. So I had to change the way I thought and do a big impact with such a small piece. Everything's
like compressed.
Yeah.
Right.
And as I was doing them, I realized one of my friends said, who's actually in the book, Toki, she said, girl, you're doing your own little chronicles over there. I was like, yeah, they're my quarantine chronicles. I was like, thank you. That's what I'm gonna call it. It's a whole, but the only problem was, after a while, I said, I got so many of them. At one point, I was doing 3 a week. I was like literally in the studio
That's great that you had an outlet.
Yeah, I was knocking them out. And I don't know what happened, but somewhere along the lines, I had like 10, 15 of them. And I hadn't really posted any on social media because I was just working. And I said, what am I going to do with these? I got so many of them and I can't really sell them because they're not my normal fences. And another one of my artist friends said, well, maybe you need to look at the small works and make them bigger. And she gave me a bunch of artists to look at, and I looked at their work and I said, this is it. So it dawned on me, the reason why I like wood so much is because of my family farm in Virginia with the log cabin. And the log cabin I used to clean all the time, and we would have to clean the wall and bring down the pictures, and those pictures were set up like salon style.
Right, right.
So like they used to back in the day, and they'd have like string or ribbon or whatever they could use. And I said, I'm going to take these wood slices and I'm going to put them on the wall, and I'm going to put something in the front, very much like Whitfield Lavelle, and make an entire installation, my first installation. Problem was, I had put my first picture of a wood slice on social media. It sold within 2 hours. Someone DM'd me. And then I put another one up. Another 2 hours, sold. I was like, every time I put one up, they're selling like
hotcakes,
like
yes.
crazy.
Yes.
So after a while, I said, okay, I can't put all of them up. The better ones I have to keep to myself because I do need them for this
For the
installation
right.
Eventually, whenever we get back to life as we knew it. And it now is part of my practice. I look at them as trying to figure out how. Whenever I want to try something new with my application process, I always try it on a wood slice first. So
you can kind of work out some ideas.
I can work out ideas. So rather than having a birchwood panel that is more expensive and is larger, I can work on it in the wood slice. I can even carve into it. So it's really a great sketchbook for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now you talk about them as chronicles, and we spoke a bit about that briefly. Just the whole idea of recording, of documenting, and you use the words on your website so we don't forget. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why we did this book here, is so we don't forget. We spoke a bit about that. I find it interesting. Just you can use art and books. Books are a form of art to document, to archive, but there's often, usually, a perspective, and you bring your own perspective to your art, to the stories that you tell. Perhaps you can talk more about that. Just because you're an art historian, and so when you record history, you record it from a certain time and a certain perspective. And you do as an artist, too.
Yeah, I've really very much, the funny thing with grad school, they make you read so much, which I would have never thought as an artist. It's not that I'm averse to reading, but it's just like, why am I reading art theory and critics? And then at one point, the light bulb clicks and you realize, oh, that's why, because they have done this before. And they actually can play into what you're making. So they had me reading Fan and France a lot, and my favorite is W.E.B. Du Bois' work with the arts movement. Mm-hmm. And the thing I loved most about Du Bois and his support of the Black artists during the Renaissance and so forth was the fact that he said, we're not averse to whites making images of Black people. What we're averse to, the fact that if we only allow whites to only make images of us, they are telling our story and we are not involved. They're telling it from observing us. So the fact that I could have a say-so in it, and I took it a step further in my work because I mainly do females.
Absolutely.
So I'm like, listen, I go to the museum and all these old paintings by old white men are of women's bodies. And yes, you can appreciate a thing of beauty, but sometimes a thing of beauty is that extra ripple that we have from that extra cupcake we had last night. You know, you know, you look at Alice Neal's work, and the beauty of Alice Neal's work is that she could see a woman that's a human.
It's human.
With all her flaws, she's still beautiful. You know, you can elevate us, yes, and that's wonderful, but sometimes you need a woman's hand to show a woman's worth. And I love the fact that I do have that opportunity. A lot of the images I found from the library, I started off with collage, like going whole hog with it while I was at grad school. And I went to the library company in Philadelphia. And the library company in Philadelphia is the oldest library in the United States. It's the first library in the United States, official library, founded by Benjamin Franklin. And I went there for an assignment and they told us to find one image. And I think they did it on purpose because they knew I was the only person doing Black images. And there are no, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna find a Black image in a place developed by the founding fathers. So I said, okay, I'm gonna ask. So I asked the librarian, and there was this very nice librarian. She was very helpful. She had been there for years, she said. And I said, well, I really want to find images of Black people, specifically Black women or children from 1940s or later. And I want them to not look negative. And she said, oh, those are probably in the shadow files. And I was like, what the hell is a shadow file? And she says to me, well, it's an old term and I really shouldn't use it. I did not want to offend you. But she said, a lot of libraries, they collect images of people who they don't know who they are.
Okay.
So when it was Black people, they called them shadow files rather than lump them in with the Caucasians. So
we have unknown Caucasian and unknown.
Yeah,
Crazy.
Exactly. That's what I said. I said, why can there's shadow? I get there's shadow because you don't really know who they are or whatever.
Right.
But if you calling it because they're Black people, that's very racist.
That is very racist.
So it turns out that it's a thing in Philadelphia during the turn of the century when photography became a thing. You'd have photography clubs that would go into Black neighborhoods and they would photograph Black skin to practice their lighting.
Interesting. Wow.
So you'd have whole clubs of people going out with their very white people, sorry, because they were the ones who could afford these very expensive cameras. Yeah. And they go out and they would test taking pictures of Black people so they can test their lighting with the camera. And I found the one little girl who's in many of my pieces. She's like my muse. And I loved her image, and it's called, the file said, A Taste of Chocolate. I lied to you not, it's still there if you go to the library.
Oh, wow.
It says A Taste of Chocolate. And I thought my eyes were tricking me. I thought it said a taste for chocolate, but it's a taste of chocolate, and it's this little girl in this adorable little white pinafore and these very grubby shoes. And she looks absolutely adorable, and she has something in her hand, And it turns out the little story says they got her to take the picture by giving her a chocolate bar.
Interesting.
So
they bribed her with candy.
So as an artist, I'm like, I want to tell this little girl's story. We don't know her name. We don't know. We only know that she was from North Philly. We don't know anything else about her, and that started me on this kind of avalanche of what is her story? What are the stories of all these other people in these shadow files?
She could even be still alive today,
Is
right?
she still alive?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, this little girl is smiling, but she has this smirk to her like, yeah, you gave me a piece of chocolate, but I'm the one who really won. All you're getting is a stupid photo. I don't even know what a photo is. But you can tell from her dress, her parents care for her. Her shoes are very worn, so they probably were her brother's shoes. They were passed down. So she probably has never had a piece of candy all to herself, much less a whole chocolate bar. So she's thinking, yeah, right, I'll smile for you, but I won here. I'm winning. So when I looked at her image during COVID, I saw the year, and it was around the year as the first during the Spanish flu.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
What are the odds? So I was like, this little girl was probably born right after the Spanish flu was over. So she, just the fact that she's even there, and I'm looking at her story now during another pandemic. It's just so many stories out there, so many ways that you can tell the stories and embrace the stories. And as women, I feel we really have this obligation to tell our stories because they have been told by others for so long and suppressed.
Right.
And we have to do it. It's like an obligation. And that's the one thing I did get from W.E.B. Du Bois, and also from what I saw in the world going on.
About telling your own stories.
Telling our stories.
Right, right. And that's part of why we got involved with this book to begin with, was about telling the stories from the pandemic so that they aren't forgotten, so that these voices are not forgotten, they're remembered. And so 20 years from now, who knows when they'll write a history of this period of time, this book will be out there, and it'll be a source. It's interesting what you say about the photographers going in, because this is an archive that was sourced from the community, which is really different kind of archive.
It is a much different type
with
of archive.
everyone contributing images. And you gave us you gave us a few other images too, I think some studio images, which we didn't use.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I was looking at the book and when I first got my copy, I was like, I know that person, you know that person. And I mean, the thing that was the best part of COVID is, as an artist, the best part was the fact that we still found a way to communicate.
Found community.
We found community.
Absolutely.
Zoom was like our life source. We would, I remember at the time I had just met Delita Martin at Art Basel Week that December before. And I met Toki Rome Taylor, who's also in the book.
Also in the book. All your friends are in here.
Yeah, and it's so crazy. Alfred Conte, I met all of them, and then COVID happened, and we had exchanged numbers, but it was more like a polite, like, oh, I love you, I love your work, here's your number, here's my number. We couldn't talk to nobody, so we started calling each other. I think from the time of March all the way until July or August, Toki, her sister Sashi, Delita Barden, and I would be on the phone on this massive, group call every day. Just, what you working on? oh, I'm working on this. And what you working on? I'm working on that. Did you see this on TV? Yeah, did you see that on TV? Oh, I think I want to create something about that. Oh, yeah, I think you should. I sent you a picture. What do you think? You know? So it was
That's
wonderful.
Great.
It was really, it brought me back to grad school where you were having that community that could kind of critique and you can bounce ideas off of, and it was wonderful. It really was. And, you know, even through all the death, because it was so, you know, we lost a lot of our people. But even through that, it made you appreciate the fact that you were a creator, that you were going to be able to leave a legacy, which is the reason why I do what I do.
Right.
So.
Right. And that was one of the points of the book too, just to create, again, this legacy is important. You know, as an art historian, I'm studying, recent art history. I'm finding with Black artists, there's often not enough documentation. There's often just too little documentation. And that's why I originally got involved with Barbara Bullock's book. A very wise man said, she's a great artist, but there's very little documentation. Why don't you do a book about her? I'll think about it. But documentation is so important. And you're documenting stories in your own way. Another thing I want to mention about the book, and you can tell me what your take on it is. It's in some ways a time capsule, and I'm calling it a memory book. We're all signing our names in it.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like your your yearbook.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's how, which is really cool. And that was one of the conversations. I had a number of conversations in just thinking about whether to even engage in this kind of project. And there seemed to be a real need, and just the whole idea of being able to share your experience with someone in time and space. Anyone can open up the book at any point in time and read about your experience, and then you can go back so you don't forget that I lived through this. Oh my gosh, I survived. We all survived.
I think like Tawny mentions it in the book about how you realize how important family is to you. And I believe also Vanessa German talks about it, that we have to find a way. Everyone goes into the arts for a different reason. Some are just creative beings and they just want to put what they create out in the world. Some of us are more business-minded about it. Like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I want to do this, and then I want to do this, and then that's when I feel like, yeah, I've done everything I want, like checking off a bucket list. But for me, when I first started doing like the little art fairs and, the live paintings, and it was all about building a legacy. Because I think I woke up one morning and I said, you know what? I think it would be really cool that one day my kids or my grandkids would be able to go to school and they'll talk about great Black artists, and there's grandma, or there's mom, And
it's way cool.
Yeah, it's like way cool. They don't think it's cool. They really don't.
Older, they might.
Now it's like, oh, Mom.
When they get older, they might.
Now, that's true. Because my teenagers, well, I have all teenagers, except for my eldest who's in his 30s. He really thinks it's cool. He's like, yeah, my mom's famous. You know that, right? But the younger ones, it's like, Ma, you're so boring. I don't want to go to another art show. Do I have to go to the museum? And they go, and if it's a solo, yeah, that's my mom's stuff. Yeah, I had to help her clean that fence. They really don't at that age. But like you said, one day they will. But now I have a granddaughter, and when I got the book, the first thing my eldest son said, "Ma, this could be a textbook. Can you imagine Alana going to school and this be one of the required readings?" I was like, yeah. I was like, but my idea of what my legacy is has changed. Yes. Now it's not so much I want to not just be a blip, because life is so short. Is very short. Is very short. We don't realize it as we're living it, but it's very short. You can get up the next morning and, you know, that afternoon you're gone.
Right, and you never know when.
And you never know when. But my husband's a pastor, and I've been to enough funerals to know, you know, I don't want my obituary to be an obituary full of filler stuff. You know, don't just write that she likes gardening. You know, I want a claim. I want something that is not just my family knowing me, which is great, because I think someone said that if one person remembers you, you'll always be remembered. But isn't it so much better if
more people remember you?
If more people remember you.
Yeah, well, you also mentioned the idea of inheritance, you know, that you're creating work that can be passed down.
On.
And also the idea of work that you're selling. So someone buys a work of art, and then it becomes part of their experience and their environment, and then that's passed on in their family.
And with my work, with it being wood, I tell Claudia all the time, I like the fact that I work on wood fences, because wood fences, they warp sometimes. You know, if you live in Miami and you bought one of my fences, it's very possible it's going to curve. But that's cool. I'm fine with that, because it shows that it's still living. It's changing. So the piece you're looking at now is going to be a different piece than what your grandchildren are going to see when they get older. We all have had that one piece of art in your home that brings up memories for you. And then when your children see it, it brings up a whole new set of memories, because they're seeing it with different eyes at a different time. So right now, in my career, I just feel like it's all about making that stamp of legacy. And whether it's museums, which is my preference, because they're going to care for the work and more people get to see it. It's great when a celebrity buys my work, and I love it, but it's all right. But if it's not in Architectural Digest, nobody gonna see the work.
Right.
Unless you're inviting me over, nobody's gonna see the work. So I like the fact that it's in a museum, and the masses can see it, other people can see it, which I love.
So looking back just at the last couple of years, obviously we've had so many changes in our society. You've had so many changes in your life, you know, and how you operate and how you work in your studio. And you know, you picked up a new series, and then you went back into your studio and started working again on your fences, and your practice has expanded. It seems like it's been very positive for you in many ways.
Very positive.
Do you feel like your career has just like boom?
Yeah.
In a good way?
Yeah, and I noticed the work change. I know we mentioned it. Yes. Like before, my fences were just starting to be more vibrant with color. I believe with one of the first pieces that was collected by the Petrucci Foundation, that was like one of the first pieces where I really went like, color. And now it's like, I like more layers. I like people to peel back and find the images floating within. So the work has changed, which is a good thing.
There's a bit more veiling, perhaps?
It's a lot more veiling. And I've learned to change how it veils. So like some pieces, when I find the image, it says, I want to be out here in the clear. I don't want a whole bunch of veiling. And then some pieces are like, listen, I want you to find me. So I've learned over time as I'm working to do it. And I've also learned that it's all right to make changes, but you don't want to make too much of a change because then people are like, what the heck is this? So that's something I'm still kind of working through.
Changes like in your style, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't go too crazy.
You can't go too crazy. People, people are like, what the heck? And there's certain things I do that I know I will never stop doing. I'm always going to work with wood or wood adjacent, as I like to say, whether it's wood pulp as far as paper, making my own paper, or actual wood pieces. I love the texture, I love the grains, I love seeing the spirals and warps, and it's beautiful to me. And it reminds me of my southern roots. It reminds me of, cleaning those logs in the house. Again,
this idea of legacy.
It
left memories, a lot of really good memories for you. So I think we're wrapping up now, and we may have a few questions from the audience.
You talked about having the wood slices kind of stick with you post-pandemic as, using them as a sketchbook, essentially. I'm curious for both of you, since we're kind of here talking about the post-COVID experience and the experience during COVID, what else has stuck? What was something that you picked up in the pandemic or adapted in the way that you work and has now followed you in this kind of post-COVID moment? And that question is for you too, Klare, not just Lavette.
I think the weirdest thing that stuck with me, and it's strange, it's not a big thing to most people, but for me it was like mind-blowing. When I got the first Time cover, they sent me all the images, and because they work with Getty, so all those images were okay for me to use. And I learned a lot about copyright, fair use, and you learn about it in your practice, but you don't realize it until it's going to be on a magazine that's seen all over the world. And I did a piece that was actually a wood slice with Sandra Bland. And I did quite a few of the women who were killed by police or by gunfire that were women of color. And I got a call from Sandra Bland's sister. Whoa. And she was concerned over the fact I had used her image. And I get that. I wasn't offended at all, because that was during the time when we saw Nipsey Hussle everywhere, and every time a famous person died, you saw replications and prints and t-shirts and murals, and I got that. But I learned how important for her it was to protect her family. And I assured her, I said, listen, that piece is never going to be sold to the general Joe Schmo. That piece, along with that whole series, is meant for a museum only. Because it is not meant for someone to covet, because her body was already coveted. It was taken from her. So I don't want that happening. So that is something I've learned with my practice, because now what I do is when I'm choosing an image of someone who is very famous or infamous, I'm very careful with how I use it and how I'm applying it on the wood. Sometimes I have to veil things more. So that was more of a business learn, I guess you would say, which is a good thing, because it makes it more open for me to be able to work on a second Time magazine cover. So, but that was the biggest thing I learned. Yeah.
I'm not sure in terms of learning. Things are just moving so quickly nowadays, and during COVID, I ended up getting a new phone. I had an iPhone 4 for like 10 years, and now I have a regular phone, which does regular phone things that I'm still learning. So I'm trying to get with the technology more, because it's essential now. If you don't have an app for everything, then you're lost. You lose points, you lose bonus, everything. So yeah, just trying to keep up with with very fast-moving times. I mean, it was shifting time, 2020, 2021, but I don't think we've stopped moving. I don't think our society, no, we're just,
And AI-generated images, and it just seems like you wake up to a
AI,
new
yes,
world.
yes, and now we have stuff with Warhol, with copyright, and there's so many things going on in our society right now. It's just really hard to, difficult to just kind of keep up with everything, you know, try to stay in the know as much as possible.
I have a little question for you. That we're on the subject of images, because obviously that keeps coming around. I'm really curious about these shadow files, and because the issue of who is that, you know, Denise Murrell's work, and who is that maid in the Olympia, right? And really bringing that to the fore, I think, has really created a lot of conversation about a lot of things. I know that the Rijksmuseum in the Netherlands has gone through to create a whole database of all Black faces, Black images in these, not that they can name them, but to find them and to see them, and usually to change some of the pejorative titles given to these things. But the fact that this was in the library and may still be in the library, I find, do you know if it's still there?
Well, from what I understood from this librarian, who was much, much older than me, I think she was older than everyone in this room,
And what year was this again?
This was in 2017.
Recent.
Yeah, and she said, this was something she would taught. She had always been a librarian. So she said, whenever they were uploading images, if it was an image that they couldn't identify, and it was a person of color, they would call it the shadow files, and they would kind of dump them in the shadow files. Now, these shadow files are also in the Smithsonian, the National Archives. Pretty much most large digital collections have them. And we get them from photographers that had clients that couldn't pay for photos. If you notice now, when you go on Pinterest, you see a lot of images of couples where they have like postcards, or like a photo of a man going off to war and he's with his girlfriend. Those are pictures that people paid to get done, and they couldn't get them out. So the photographer kept the pictures, and we don't know who they are. So there's a lot of them, and it's just how they archived them at one time by giving that term of the shadow files. I'm sure they don't use it necessarily anymore, but I was just so aghast that at one time this was a thing.
And that where there's this residue of people who still use these terms.
And I guess for me, it was more, okay, I'm not gonna necessarily look at it as a negative. I'm looking at it as a moment of ignorance, and I'm gonna embrace it. So if we're the shadow, that means we're human, because you can't be a human being out in the light without a shadow. So I put the shadows in my work. So a lot of my large fences, you will see these kind of shadow images of people in the background. They have no faces, they're literally—
You gave that little girl a life.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's just, once again, like I said, the responsibility, you know, and it's almost like sometimes I get worn down by it because there's so many stories I want to tell. And I don't have enough time, and sometimes I don't have enough material to tell them. But the point is to tell them and do it well. And hopefully at one point when I'm blessed enough to get a retrospective, I can have all of the work there and people can see it and maybe build their own stories from it. I'm so excited when I see people looking at the work. What do you think it means? You know?
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Lavette.
Thank you.
And, thank you, everyone, for coming here tonight and being with us. And it was great to finally meet you in person.
It was so great.
Fantastic
Good night.
conversation. This is certainly going to be a great addition to the archive for the Petrucci Family Foundation, a point in time of your career, your stories, and a very important story to tell it is. Thank you very much.